If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.
We're going to get into how you can grow the best tomatoes. Now, for those of you who are in California, this is not that relevant, but there is content that we're going to provide that you can apply now while your plants are just being planted or have already been planted. This is not just a, here's what you got to do before. This is a whole gamut of how you can, throughout the whole process of starting to harvesting your tomatoes. And this is something that, tomatoes are one of the most popular plants that anybody grows. There are some people that do not like tomatoes and don't grow them, but there are few and far between. So we grow about 110 tomatoes each year, and we've been doing this for a number of years, and we've found out different methods and followed and watched and learned from other gardeners, master gardeners, university extension offices on how we have found to be the successful, the most success that we found.
Right. So you want to, if you're going to grow tomatoes in a container, a lot of people ask me this question because they know that tomatoes need full sun. They might not have full sun, so they grow them in like a 5-gallon bucket or a grow bag or whatever. And you want to make sure you have the right size of container for your tomatoes. If it's a heavy producing tomato, like a vine tomato, like a beefsteak,
black creme,
you want to make sure you're using at least a 5-gallon bucket.
Drainage holes in all containers.
Drainage holes, and that you have that right size. But then there's something like a Tiny Tim, which is a smaller hybrid variety. It's kind of like
an heirloom variety.
It's an heirloom, sorry. 16
inches tall.
Yeah, 16 inches tall. It's like a tiny little bush tomato, and it's fun to grow.
Heavy producer.
And it produces a lot of cherry tomatoes. And that's something you can grow in your patio if you get proper sunlight.
We did it in a 1-gallon grow bag last year from Root Maker, and it worked really, really well.
So the biggest, another thing is you want, just as I had mentioned, you want to think about where you're putting these tomatoes. If you grow it for the root or the fruit, you want full sun. If you grow it for the greens or the leaves, you can do partial shade. So tomatoes, you're growing for the fruit, so you want to make sure you have full shade or full sun.
Now that means that kind of works.
You can have some shade.
Yeah, and we found that people, that if you're going to grow for cherry varieties, like you talked about, or grape varieties, you can get away with a little less sun. It's the big one.
It's the big one. So if you're trying to grow a nice, big tomato, slicing tomato, you definitely want to look for that full sun area. And like we have a maple tree?
Yeah, a giant maple tree
above the middle part of our garden, and that's not terrible. We've planted tomatoes underneath it because it's a south-facing garden, so it gets a lot of east and west sun. But if you have like an only east side garden or a west side garden, you wouldn't want a big tree over it.
And it's beneficial because during the hottest portions of the day during the summer, it actually adds a little relief to the plants that it shades. So it does kind of help. It benefits in some aspects of the benefit of having a tree there.
And so then also compost. So you want to make sure whether you're growing in a raised bed or container, straw bale, what have you, you want to make sure you're using compost or good potting soil mix. If you're growing in the ground, you want to make sure your soil is healthy.
That's right.
And it has good nutrients, and you're not growing in some dusty old gray dirt.
Oh, and even if you don't know, you need to get a soil test from Soil Savvy. You can use TWVG19, save 10% on your order, and they'll give you 14 points of analyzation of what's going on with your soil, the abundance, the lacking, how to fix it, because we just can't look at soil and go, okay, that pH or that soil is this and it has this. There's no way of knowing that unless we get an analyzation of the soil to know where we're at.
Right.
And there's no bigger disappointment than you've put all this time and effort in, money, starts, all this stuff, and then the plant doesn't produce at all because you have poor soil.
Exactly. One of the other things is people don't, I know like in the city, people do this, but you grew up not in the city.
Right.
Is caging or staking your tomatoes.
Well, we caged them. For tomatoes, but like cucumbers and other vine crops, we never caged anything. Except
well, some people don't cage them.
Right, that's right. But we have to cage the tomatoes. When we plant them, we have to cage them. You get 50% more production when you get them off the ground, because otherwise they sit on the ground, they ripen, and they rot. But before we talk about, we've talked about caging, let's talk about how we plant the tomato, or what we need to do in order to get that.
You plant the tomato, we plant our tomatoes deep, and this allows, tomato is part of the nightshade family. If you look at your tomato stem, it has all these little hairs very like white, clear hairs that are coming off the stem, and that means that those are potential roots. Not all vegetables in the nightshade family have this ability, but tomatoes definitely do. So when you plant that tomato, if you plant it deep, it's going to develop roots off of that stem. And so when you plant them deep, it allows for better root growth, development. So
more
root to soil,
healthier plant.
Root to soil contact. And then what we do is after we plant it deep, we remove about 3 to 6 inches of, not right away, we remove the bottom row of leaves so it's not touching the soil. And then as the plant grows, we continue to remove the leaves about 6 inches or so.
Yeah. We plant the 3/4 of the plant goes in the ground, a quarter of the plant stays above the ground to get all that stem to soil contact. Well, we can put, and people say, well, what do you put in the hole at the time of planting? Because everybody's got their magical mix that they've all swear by, and that's great. If you've been using a certain 97 different things you put in the hole at the time of planting for tomatoes, and it continues to work for you, continue to do it. We keep it very simple. You can add crushed powdered eggshells. If you just throw the eggshell in the hole, it's not going to break down in time to add nutrients to the plant during this growing season. Secondly, you can use an all-balanced fertilizer. We recommend Dr. Earth tomato and veg and herb fertilizer. It's a very balanced fertilizer, and it gives the plants what it needs. The benefit of organic fertilizer versus a liquid fertilizer is the plant picks up in the organic fertilizer what it needs when it needs it. Liquid fertilizer or an organic or a liquid fertilizer of a chemical form or a chemical fertilizer of a granular form, the plants get all of it at once. It's an instant hit, and they become addicted to it, and your plants become drug addicts essentially because they do not do well if they're not continued fed that fertilizer of the chemical form. It messes them up.
So yeah, so there's something,
and people put powdered
milk, eggshells, Tums,
yeah,
whatever works for you. That's fine. Keep doing that.
But we don't have to add extra calcium, and that's what those particular items provide the plant. Because you probably have plenty of calcium in your garden, you're just not watering the plant enough for the plant to pick up the calcium.
So if you've ever had blossom end rot, it's basically when you take your tomato, you pick it off the vine, you look at the bottom of it, which is the blossom end, and it's rotted. It's like black. Sometimes brownish colored, and it just looks bleh. So that's blossom end rot, and what that is a lack of access of calcium to your plants. So this commonly happens because we plant our tomatoes typically here around Memorial Day weekend, and then at that point it's usually been a pretty wet spring. We've usually had a lot of rain, and then by the time the tomatoes start to fruit, maybe we've reached not necessarily a drought, but we've had some dry days, and now your garden is not as moist as you would like it to be, and so that causes a problem. So if you continually water, use irrigation, this will help eliminate that problem because the calcium is not locked up in your soil and your plants have access to it.
In addition to that, there's a lot of diseases your plant's going to get. 90% of the problems from diseases are from soil splashing up on the leaves. So we want to mulch, and we want to mulch heavy with chemical-free, seed-free grass clippings, shredded leaves, straw, whatever we can get.
Whatever works for you.
To prevent soil from splashing up. In addition, that holds moisture in, so less watering, more moisture in the soil, so better calcium pickup from the plant so you don't have the blossom end rot, and the suppression of weeds. If the weeds can't get sun exposure, they can't grow, so you're killing a lot of birds with one stone when you use mulch.
Trimming the leaves. We do this continuously throughout the season. You want to trim the bottom 6 inches of your tomatoes as the growth occurs, especially to keep it from touching the soil.
Ground up the stem 6 to 8 inches. Keep that bottom stem completely opened up, and keep adding mulch. And we want to water consistently, as we've talked about.
And then also, you want to keep harvesting. As you continually harvest, the plant will produce more.
If you don't harvest, they're going to shut down on you right away. That's every vegetable that we grow. Well, that's just a small snippet of how you can grow successful tomatoes in your garden. You can find a whole lot more videos on our website, the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. Look under, just search tomato growing.
For more information, please visit the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com.